Welcome everyone to another North to South show here presented by Touchdowns to Home Runs. And I know today is a bit different. It is the May long weekend here in Canada for me. So I'm doing some things later tonight. But I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. So therefore I am doing a pre-recorded episode. We will be back Wednesday with our normal show, doing the live show and everything, taking fan questions, all stuff like that. But that does not mean that we do not have a really, really good show in store today, because today we're going to talk the breaking news that just came out today at 12 o'clock when TJ Finley officially committed to Auburn. I know I already did kind of a segment talking about can TJ Finley start at Auburn, and that was a bit more scripted and everything. Here I'm just going to give my initial thoughts on what I think about TJ Finley going to Auburn and everything like that, and how the whole Bo Nix situation will play out and what I think for Auburn about that. I also want to talk about the SEC East. Let's talk some SEC East football, because I want to talk about how open is the second place position in the SEC East really this season. I know it's kind of obvious. I think at least Georgia, it's theirs to win the SEC East, but I want to talk about that second place spot, because there are a lot of teams coming in this season that could be fighting for that second place spot, which I think will be very entertaining to watch how that all shakes out. And then we'll finish up with our best versus the rest segment today. One of the most interesting games that we have in all of week one, not from really a media standpoint, and you're not going to get like those really, really, really high caliber teams. Like, I'm not talking that this is a Clemson Georgia game, but LSU UCLA. LSU travels out west to go to Pasadena to take on UCLA week one, which should be a very interesting game. And if you've seen the lines and what that game is opened up at, you will be very, very intrigued by this best versus rest segment. So we got a packed show today, guys. Sit back, relax, and of course, enjoy the show. We got a packed show today. So first, starting off with my just initial reaction to TJ Finley committing to Auburn over, I'm pretty sure Penn State and Alabama were in the conversation. I think Michigan was too. I did a segment on this earlier, just talking about can TJ Finley become the starter for Auburn, and I said it's not really out of reach. I think that there is a good probability if TJ goes in, puts the work in and everything, I think he has a good chance to start at Auburn. I do think out of those four teams that I just named, Auburn, Alabama, Penn State, and Michigan, I do think Auburn was definitely the best choice for him, because he gets to stay in the SEC. I know no matter where you're going to choose out of those four teams, you're going to get the media attention. If you play good, you're going to get the attention there, whether it's at Michigan, whether it's at Penn State, whether it's at Auburn, whether it's at Alabama. But I think he wanted to stay in the SEC, and Alabama, the quarterback competition for the next coming years, is going to be really, really, really tough with Bryce Young there. So I think all in all, Auburn is probably the team out of those teams there. I'd say Auburn and Michigan are the teams that you'd have the best chance at competing for a starting quarterback job. I'd then go Penn State. Sean Clifford's still the man there, but I think he's kind of got that locked up. There could be some competition there if he were to go there, but Alabama, I think they're still sticking with Bryce Young no matter what. So he ultimately goes to Auburn. The main concern for Auburn over the last couple of years, and we talked about this when I had my friends at the War Report come on this show to talk about Auburn's schedule breakdown and everything like that, talking about how Auburn's going to look this season, going game by game by game. And they really, really stressed the ability that this team last season and the last couple seasons, Bo Nix and this Auburn offense have not been able to travel on the road and perform to any level of success to be able to go and get some big wins. And Auburn plays some big road games this season. You look at obviously the Penn State game, the game where they go down to Happy Valley this season, which is an early season showdown, which I already did my preview on that, so definitely click that little notification up there to go watch that. You look at other games that they're going to travel this season. I think they go to LSU this year. Again, that's going to be another big game. So traveling on the road offensively is going to be a stress point for Bryan Harsin in his first season at Auburn. Not saying that he has to go in there and score 50 plus points every single game, every single road game that Auburn goes and plays, but performing consistently and performing successfully, that doesn't mean that you go out and get a win every single road game you play. Like going to Penn State and putting up 35 plus points but still losing the game, that is not going to be a problem on your offense. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, because I do think Auburn has a very talented defense this season, but if your offense is able to travel to Happy Valley and let's say a whiteout game and put up 35 plus points, that is not a reflection on how your offense is played. That's a reflection on how your defense is played. So I think there is tons of room to grow for Bryan Harsin and this team offensively. And TJ Finley, And Bo Nix's problem has been traveling on the road and just his performance there. I think TJ Finley is definitely a work in progress, but he has the talent to be something really special. I think you already know what you've got out of Bo Nix. I think that he's shown that over the last couple of years. I think that he's had more than enough chances to prove what he has at Auburn. And let's be honest, he still has some big wins. You look at the win against Oregon. I think that was his first start ever. He beats Oregon. He's beat Alabama before, which is something that not many teams, not many quarterbacks in the SEC can say at all. Bo Nix, just his problem is getting those big signature wins on the road. And TJ Finley, man, he's got the working pieces to be something successful at Auburn. I love the size of him. He's a pocket passer. He loves passing from the pocket, and he's not afraid to take hits. His problem is his footwork right now is a bit choppy. Sometimes he doesn't throw off the right foot, and his release is a bit off. He could release the ball just a bit quicker, and that's what I kind of went through in my initial video of just talking about can TJ Finley start at Auburn. But the pieces are there. The size is there. I think the arm is definitely there for TJ Finley to be a successful quarterback. And when he's on, he is on. He's throwing the ball accuracy. Love him throwing on the out routes and everything like that. I think he's got some downfield accuracy. TJ Finley, all in all, I think could be I don't know what I want to talk about this season, because do I think that he could be a top 7 QB this season if Auburn gives him the chance and he's really able to take the most of it? I think that that's definitely possible. I'm talking top 4. I don't think that's possible for this year, but you start working this guy through when you have Matt Corral exit this season, when you have JT Daniels exit next season, and let's say TJ Finley goes out and has a really successful season this year, maybe you could see TJ Finley being a top 3 guy in the SEC for the next coming years. So lots to talk about there, lots of interesting stuff. When do I see TJ Finley taking the snaps for Auburn? Do I see it week 1? Do I see it after the Penn State game? Let's say that they start Bo Nix in Happy Valley and things just do not work out. Let's say Auburn only scores 1 touchdown offensively. They score 7, and it's not even on passing. It's just rushing. Bo Nix throws for 2 or 3 interceptions. Do I see it after that game? Do I see this as a mid-season thing where, let's say Auburn's already down 3-3 in their schedule. They've lost a couple of SEC opponents. They've won the games against, I think they play Georgia State. They play Alabama State, teams like that. Where do I see TJ Finley realistically coming in and starting for Auburn this season? The thing that worries me about Auburn, and the fact that I think the most notable thing for this will be Auburn fans want to know if he's going to be starting against Penn State or not, because the Penn State game is the big one out of all the first games. You play some group of 5 opponents early on and who cares? Bo Nix or TJ Finley starting, I don't think it's really going to change the outcome of that game. But the Penn State game, it definitely will. Can I see TJ Finley starting by that Penn State game? I think it really comes down to who's starting week 1. I believe that who starts week 1 will start week 3 against Penn State, because I just don't see any I just don't see any problems occurring against those 2 first games, which are both group of 5 opponents for Auburn this season. I mean, you go out, I'm pretty sure they play Alabama State first, and then it might be Akron who's second. I think that they're the next team on that board for Auburn. I can't remember who both of the teams are. I know that they also got Georgia State on there. But I just don't see any problems for whoever the starter is in either of those games. So I believe who's starting week 1 will go in and be the starter for that Penn State game. Honestly, I think right now, I still think Bo Nix will win the competition, or he's still going to be QB1 going into week 1. And I see TJ Finley taking over after week 4. Let's say Bo Nix. If Bo Nix is the quarterback for Penn State, that Penn State game, I see TJ Finley going in and taking over that role week 4 after that game. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on TJ Finley going to Auburn. I love the move, not only for TJ Finley, but also for Auburn. You got a good running back core over there in Auburn already. Obviously, Tank Bigsby and Shivers over there. I think that you definitely have some talent in the wide receiver core. You look at guys like Xavion Capers, really high on him. Other guys Auburn has the talent around him, and if you just get the right quarterback in your system and you just work through all these minor things that are making TJ Finley's game not as successful as it could be, you could find success at Auburn this season. So look for TJ Finley to have a successful career at Auburn. Very excited to see what he does there. Moving on now from talking about the SEC West, and we just went through Auburn and TJ Finley. Now I want to talk some SEC East football, because The SEC East, I feel like so far out of all the videos I've done, I've definitely tended more towards doing West content. I mean, I've done some Gamecock things. I've done some things on Tennessee. I've done a couple things on Georgia and Florida, but mainly I look at a bunch of content that I've done for like LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas A&M, a bunch of schools like that, because I think the SEC West is stronger this year. But what I want to talk about here, and it's not really scripted or anything, I just want to talk off the top of my head about how I feel about how open the SEC East is this season and how open that second spot in the SEC East is this season. I don't think that there's any problem, at least for me, coming out and saying that I think Georgia is the best team in the SEC East, and it's their division to lose 110%. I mean, JT Daniels is looking like he's going to have a great season this year. I think Georgia has one of the better running back rooms in the country. Their O-line always performs well. Yes, you go down George Pickens in the receiving game, but I still think that receiving core still has a lot of talent on there. And then you look defensively, one of the better defensive lines in all the nation. I think the secondary will be there. The linebackers will be there. And you just look at the talent gap and everything from Georgia to the rest of the SEC teams. I think Georgia's got this division locked up. But anything could happen. Any of these teams could jump up and be first. Anything can happen. But I want to talk about, assuming that, let's say, Georgia does do what they're expected to do and win the SEC East, I want to talk about this second place, because I think that there's definitely a favorite for SEC East second team, and that's obviously going to be Florida, obviously the SEC East champions from last season. But as much as everyone wants to think that Florida is, and as much as I do think that Florida is still underrated for what the drop-off, we all know the drop-off from last season, it was bad. They lost a lot of talent. You lose your Heisman finalist quarterback. You lose the second best player in all of the drafting, Kyle Pitts. You lose Kadarius Toney. You lose Grimes. You lose a couple guys defensively. But I still think that this Florida team has tons of talent. You look at the secondary, I look at Elam being one of the better cornerbacks in all of the nation there. I think Emory Jones goes in and has a successful year at Florida. I look at the running back position, DeMarcus Bowman going in for Florida, big transfer from Clemson. Justin Shorter in the receiving game, Zippier in the receiving game. I still see a lot of talent all around this team for Florida. But let's say Florida isn't that second team. Let's say Florida is playing more competitive games against teams like Kentucky or teams like Missouri or teams like South Carolina or teams like Tennessee, maybe even throwing Vanderbilt there. I want to talk about this second place team. Let's start off with talking about Kentucky, because Kentucky, historically for me, is the team that I'm naturally harsh on. And I come out there and I admit that in all of my videos. Anytime I talk about Kentucky, and Kentucky fans have been very, very respectful and appreciative that I do come out and admit that there is some bias, at least for me, when I talk about Kentucky. All in all, I think that Kentucky still has a chance, and even though I talk harsh on them, and even though every single season I still think my Gamecocks have Kentucky wrapped up, I'm always proven wrong, and Kentucky's always usually in the top half of the SEC East each and every season. I'm pretty sure Joey Gatewood is going to be going in as your quarterback this season. You're also going to have Levis transferring in from Penn State. But all in all, Chris Rodriguez in the running back game, he's one of the better running backs in the SEC. And I think defensively, Kentucky's always able to put up a really, really good defensive performance each and every single season. I don't know what else to say about Kentucky. Is I always go into the season on them low, and they always finish out higher than what I expect. So I think Kentucky, if they are able to be competitive with Florida this season and maybe get a big win somewhere else, I'm not saying that they upset Georgia, but beat out the rest of the SEC East, maybe get out a big win against Ole Miss this season, which I'm pretty sure, do they play them this season? No, Kentucky plays Mississippi State. They're their SEC West opponent, and I'm not sure who else Kentucky plays this season, but I think Kentucky, if they just go out and run the table against some of the weaker SEC East teams, this is definitely a team that you could see second place. Now I want to talk about Missouri, because Missouri is a team that I might think that they're my most underrated team in all of the SEC this season, just from a standpoint of people don't talk about them. They don't get the media attention that, let's say, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Georgia, Florida, all those teams get. But Missouri last season, I thought, did really well. Obviously, you're going to lose your best player from last season, Nick Bolton, but you look at the offensive side of the ball, I really like what they got going over there. Connor Baszlik returns at quarterback, was one of the better freshmen in all of college football last season. You look at the running game, you look at Batty, and then you look at the receiving game. I look at guys like Chisholm out there and Knox out there. I think Missouri, defensively, there still could be some additions to that. Obviously, losing Nick Bolton will be a huge piece, and they were inconsistent some points. I thought that their defense was really, really good at some points in the season, and then you look at some other games. I think I look at the Mississippi State game for Missouri, and I look at their defense, and they didn't perform that well. But overall, I think Missouri is definitely a team that you could see compete with a team like Florida this season. You could see them compete with Kentucky. I think Missouri, Kentucky, again, not a game that when you see that on your SEC helmet schedule is going to stand out to you, but that is definitely going to be a more competitive game than, let's say, I think this season it's going to be a more competitive game than Alabama, Florida, maybe, something like that. That's going to be an underrated game. Let's talk about my Gamecocks. Let's even throw in my Gamecocks, because if you don't know, I am a big South Carolina Gamecocks fan. Shane Beamer coming into his first season at South Carolina, and I am optimistic, over the moon, not in the sense that I think this is a national championship contending team, but over the moon in the sense that I really love the trajectory that this team is going. I think the quarterback position, we got a really interesting thing going on right now. I still think Luke Doty is the guy, but maybe look for Jason Brown. I think our receiving core, from what I was thinking in December to what I'm thinking now after spring ball and everything like that, has improved. I really like the improvements that I've seen from Dak Joyner. I look at the tight end position, EJ Jenkins, big transfer from St. Francis. I'm excited to see what he has to bring to the table. I look at the running back position. You look at Marshawn Lloyd, Kevin Harris, and as Zaquandre White, who showed major improvements in the spring game. I'm really, really excited to see what this new South Carolina offense has to bring to 2021. The defensive side of the ball, I think we have definitely an underrated D-line. You look at guys like Jordan Burch, Zach Pickens, Jordan Stretchin. You look at guys like Kinsley Enikbari leading the SEC in sacks last season. I think we got real talent on that D-line. The problem is going to be that secondary, which I turn to a guy like Cam Smith. I think he's coming in as a sophomore. He's either a sophomore or a junior coming into this season, but I think the world of him. I think he's going to have a huge season, but it's kind of the guys around him, and that secondary is going to be where the questions are for South Carolina. If our offense can be as successful as I think many Gamecock fans are hoping that it would be this season, I think maybe you at least see us competing for that third spot. I'm not saying that we're going to be competing with that second spot, because I think Florida is that second place team right now. I think Missouri and Kentucky are also competing to that. But let's say South Carolina knocks off Kentucky at home. Let's say South Carolina goes on the road and beats Mizzou. Let's say South Carolina takes care of Tennessee and Vanderbilt and all those teams, and then they play a competitive game against Florida. I think South Carolina will be up in that second half again for the SEC East 110%. It all depends, in my opinion, on how this secondary plays this season and how many points we can put up on the board offensively each and every game, because that's kind of been our problem the last couple seasons. Our defense hasn't been terrible. I just think that our offense needs to put up way more points than what we do. Tennessee even. Let's talk about Tennessee and Josh Heupel going into his first season at Tennessee, because this is definitely one of the more intriguing teams going into this season. You look at the quarterback position, there are 4 guys all competing for that starting role. You look at Hendon Hooker, Harrison Bailey, Brian Maurer, and then Joe Milton from Michigan. I have no clue. From what I saw from after spring ball practice, I'm really, really high on Harrison Bailey taking over that. But even Joe Milton from Michigan and Hendon Hooker, I think, are also very, very, very much in the mix. And that will be definitely one of the more intriguing quarterback battles that we have all season out of any college team. But let's say Josh Heupel is the answer at Tennessee. I still think Tennessee has loads of talent, even though they lose some big-name guys like Eric Gray. They lose Henry To'oTo'o. They lose Wanya Morris, guys like that. Even though they lose talent like that, I still think that this Tennessee team is stacked with talent all across the board. And maybe even Tennessee is one of the weaker teams this year. Let's say that they start on a roll, go 3-0 to start out the season or something like that. Even 2-1, let's say that they do drop the pick game. I still think if they make that game competitive, there's still some definitely signs of improvement for this Tennessee team, and maybe they go on and improve as the season goes on and starts to make competitive games with a team like Florida. They go to Florida this season. I'm not saying that they're going to beat Florida, but let's say they just play competitive against Florida. I thought that they even played competitive in parts last season against Florida. Let's say that they play a really competitive game against Georgia. Let's say they play a really competitive game against Kentucky. I still think Tennessee, although it is unlikely, I still think Tennessee could be a very, very good football program from what people think they will this season. So second place, I think there are tons of good teams to compete for this. I'm still obviously taking Florida as my number one to be that second place team in the SEC East. I'd then probably go Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, and then still have Vanderbilt at the bottom of the division. So that's just an early look, in my opinion, at what we're looking at in the SEC East this season and really zeroing in on that second place team. Let's finish up with definitely talking about one of the most underrated games in all of week one for our best versus the rest segment, where we take an SEC out of opponent game and break it down, kind of give you a short little intro into the SEC out of opponent game, because I'm pretty sure we all have an opinion and have lots to talk about LSU coming into this season. But UCLA, especially if you're an SEC fan, it's not a team that you're going to know the most about. But you look at some of the games in week one, obviously jumps out at you. Miami, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, obviously, Wisconsin, Penn State, tons of good games week one. But this LSU versus UCLA game, a game where LSU goes out west to take on UCLA in Pasadena, is a very interesting one, and I think that it's just got even more hype and everything around it ever since the lines have came out, where LSU only opens up as less than a field goal underdog to UCLA. Now, I think LSU talent-wise is the better team in this situation than UCLA, but talent doesn't always mean everything. Coaching means something, the game plan that you put together, and there's lots to talk about in this game and reasons why this game is as low as it is. And I just want to talk about first, before we start talking about LSU really in this game, I really just want to talk about UCLA. I just want to point out the last time, not to say that this has anything to do with this game, but the last time, at least from my recent memory, the last time an SEC opponent went to UCLA to play kind of one of these bigger early week out of conference opponent games, whatever you want to call it, it was Texas A&M versus UCLA, and this was when kind of the legend of Josh Rosen was born. When UCLA comes back against Texas A&M and has a huge win, I remember that game, just watching the highlights. I didn't watch it live, but that was a game that you definitely saw highlights of for a long, long time, and that's kind of what rose Josh Rosen's draft stock or whatever, and ultimately got him taken in the top, 15? He went like 11 or something, 12 to the Cardinals. I can't remember exactly, and now you have no clue whereabouts he is. I think he's on the Buccaneers or something as like their third or fourth string quarterback. But UCLA last season with 3-4 in the Pac-12 South, they finished 5th overall in the Pac-12 South, and the Pac-12 is a very interesting, especially as SEC fans, our opinion of the Pac-12 definitely differs from what our opinion of the SEC is, because as soon as you hear Pac-12, you just think Oregon, Washington, and that's usually where your mind, Oregon, Washington, USC, that's usually where your mind goes to, and you usually have a couple other competitive teams in there, but that kind of changes over year. You don't think off the bat that they're as good as the SEC, but I tell you that this UCLA team, even though they did go 3-4, there is still lots to look forward to and lots of experience returning on this UCLA team. This team can definitely score, and I think that that is definitely going to be a big key and highlight for this game, is how LSU's defense will be able to do against UCLA's offense, because UCLA's lowest scoring game, they put up 25 points, and that was a win against ASU last season. They were putting up consistently 30-plus points, 38 points, 40-plus points in each and every game, and I think that that's something that definitely has to be circled for LSU if they want to be able to come out of Pasadena with a win in this game. Tons of experience. I've already talked about it, but tons of experience coming back for UCLA this season. I think UCLA is returning tons of talent, and I'm going to get into that. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is set to be the starter quarterback for the Bruins this season, obviously. Started for most of the games last season, had a really good season. He's kind of a dual threat guy. I like him in the rushing game, and he's always really good passing as well. Their leading receiver returns in Greg Dulcich. I got to get that name right because it looks like Dulcich. I don't need to go into too much about his name, but Dulcich, leading receiver, he's a tight end for UCLA, comes back this season. And then Kyle Phillips is also coming back, their leading pass catcher in the receiving core, the wide receivers. So I think tons of talent returns for Thompson-Robinson in the receiving game. I think at the running back game, I think you got tons of talent coming back there, and a very interesting situation because, yes, your leading rusher Felton does go out of UCLA, but you do have Brown returning, and then you also have an intriguing transfer from Michigan, Zach Charbonnet, which is a guy that I actually watched a lot because even though I'm a big SEC fan, and if you've watched this channel for a while, you know my partner on this channel, Bernie, is a big Michigan fan. And I always love tuning into Michigan games and just see what's going on there. Zach Charbonnet was the guy that you heard his name a lot. He is coming back home to California, where he is from, to play for UCLA. And I think that he will actually be a huge success piece in this UCLA rushing game this season. Very excited to see what he does at UCLA. all 5 starters on the O-line return for UCLA this season, which returning experience for the O-line is a huge piece, especially for the 12th best rushing game in all of college football this season, which UCLA did have last season, and much of that is attributed and credited to this UCLA offensive line. So getting all 5 of those guys back is definitely going to help Charbonnet and Brown have a really successful rushing game this season, and also obviously help Thompson Robinson in the passing game when you can have guys protect like that, have guys that you worked with before. So lots to look forward to on this UCLA offense. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, they also return tons of talent. They obviously lose one of their star players. They lose Odigizua to the Cowboys. He goes off to the NFL draft, obviously. But the pass rush effectiveness, I still think, is here for UCLA. You look at guys like Johnson, Calvert, Agood, Jackson, Ogbania. Sorry, these names are tough to pronounce sometimes. All these guys are being present this season for the UCLA Bruins, and in a team that had one of the most successful pass rushes in all of the Pac-12 last season, especially. I think that this team led the Pac-12 in sacks. Having those guys back is going to be absolutely key for getting after the quarterback this season. And I even look at the secondary. The secondary, I think, is going to be the most successful piece for UCLA this season on the defensive side of the ball. You look at Blaylock and you look at Knight to lead this secondary. Overall, the secondary last season had a late resurgence in picking up 9 interceptions, 8 interceptions in the last 4 games, I'm pretty sure. I think that the secondary, especially you look at the safety position, again, I said it, Blaylock and Knight is going to be kind of your strength of this UCLA defense this season. So lots to look forward to on both sides of the ball, lots of returning talent. Yes, you do lose some guys, especially the running back position. Obviously, I said it, Felton, but you still return most of your talent. And I think that UCLA has a really strong core of what their offense and defense is going to be next season. So now let's talk about LSU a bit and talk about kind of the keys for LSU to win this game. We don't know the starting quarterback for LSU. I think that is definitely one of the more intriguing quarterback battles of all of college football going into next season. You can look at Max Johnson versus Miles Brennan. Very intriguing there. I think either guy should be successful in this game, and whoever they go in at quarterback, I think is going to play really well for LSU. You look at Davis Price at the running back position. You look at like Booty at the wide receiver position, obviously their main guy. How is LSU going to be able, and what is my keys to success for LSU this season and really in this game to come out of Pasadena with a win? Because I'm not saying that LSU is going to be out-talented in this game, but you do traveling on the road and scoring on the road is always a tough task, and it's the first week of the season. I'm not saying that this is some mid-season form for LSU, especially coming off of how LSU did last season. Are we expecting LSU to just go back to some form of 2019? Not to say that they're going to be as successful then, but just coaching-wise and game plan-wise, are they just going to be able to be more fluent and everything like that? Or should we expect some 2020 LSU team to show up in this game? So I'm going to go through some of my keys for the game for LSU. I'm looking at Gay, I'm looking at Farrell, I'm looking at Logan, and I'm looking at Anthony to be able to slow down the run game. Again, I said it, with 5 returning starters in the 12th best rushing offense in all of the country last season, you're going to have to slow this running game down in some sort. I think that relying on the passing game, if you can get UCLA to really target the passing game, I think that LSU definitely has the best cornerback duo, one of the best quarterback duos in all of the country, of course. I'm talking Eli Ricks and Derek Stingley. So if you could really force the passing game onto UCLA, I think that will be a huge win. Spy and contain Thompson Robinson because I think he is a dual threat quarterback. He rushed for over 100 yards in a couple games last season, or I know he definitely did in the Colorado game last season. So you don't want him rushing for extra yards. Contain him. Again, make him pass. Don't make this game be won for UCLA with the ground game, whether that be from the quarterback position or whether that be from the running back position. The O has to score on the road, and I think that is an obvious thing. Week 1, you're traveling far away. Like, this isn't just some short travel to Alabama. Yes, I do think that going to Alabama is going to be much harsher of an environment to play in, but the drive is way shorter, and you're going to be having to take a plane, playing in a completely different climate, a completely different atmosphere, all those kinds of things. When you go out west, your sleep schedule, everything like that, you're going 3 hours behind. Lots of things to take in and traveling on the road to Pasadena. Kind of switches things up a bit, so that's going to be interesting. And I think that LSU definitely has to be able to score on the road. I'm looking at least 35 plus points on the board for LSU to be able to win this game, which I think is in reach no matter who is at quarterback, whether that is Max Johnson or whether that is Miles Brennan, I think that is definitely in reach. But you got to score 35 plus in my opinion. My last thing pretty much is you got to pick apart the corners. The safety is going to be their strong suit, so really look to pick apart the corners if you want to get a passing game going. I think that the rushing game is going to be a bit harder getting it going with Davis Price, especially with the big defensive front and the returning experience to this defensive front with UCLA and every guy that they have. So really try to pick apart these corners, try to get yourselves in man coverage situations, and that's when you see guys like Booty have really big games, and I think that he's going to be a guy that definitely needs to be targeted in this game for LSU. My final score prediction for this game, so far in all of my score predictions games for these best versus the rest segments, I've taken the SEC team in every single game except the Auburn Penn State one. Or no, that's a lie. I took Texas in the Texas Arkansas one. I took Penn State in the Penn State Auburn one. I've taken Alabama over Miami. I've taken Ole Miss over LSU. I've taken Georgia over Clemson, which was definitely a big one. And in this one, right now I think LSU should still win this game. Again, I think that this is going to be a toss-up in a very close and interesting game. My final score prediction, I have a high-scoring one, 42-38 for LSU. Again, LSU comes in less than a field goal favorite in this game. Week 1 in Pasadena, but I still think LSU should be able to score the ball no matter who they have at quarterback, and they are going to get scored on. I do think that this UCLA offense is going to put up some points against LSU, but overall, I do have LSU coming out of this game with a win in a very, very close down-to-the-wire offensive shootout game in Pasadena. So that is going to be the show for today, guys. Again, thank you for understanding that this is a pre-recorded show. We are going to go back to our regular format on Wednesday where we will be able to have live questions and everything like that. But for now, hope you really appreciated the show. Have a nice rest of your Monday. Thanks for watching. Like the video down below. Comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and definitely come back for Wednesday's show.